Hey Internet! Today we're going to talk a little bit about maintaining proper humidity levels in any enclosure, whether that is a tub, a vision cage, an exoterra, a wooden enclosure, whatever that may be. And today with me to kind of help talk about that is our boy Remus, the yellow Ackie monitor. So when we talk about proper humidity, that's a big word that's really important. And it's really important for a lot of different reasons. Number one, it's based on where they come from naturally. So like a rainbow boa, they have to be super, super humid. I mean, not like drenching living in swamp because that can lead to stagnation and stuff, but they have to be very well hydrated. If you have a rainbow boa, it gets dehydrated, that can, be very, very detrimental, even leading to loss of life. And that's not something that we want. As well as we're going to, mostly a lot of this has to do kind of with like lizards and arid species, is kind of what I want to talk a little bit more specifically about. And that is, we always sit here and we try to recreate their natural environment as much as we can based on where we live in these boxes that we keep them in our house. Once again, regardless of what you keep them in, we always try to recreate that as much as we can. So, when I was talking about desert species, so we think arid, dry, really high, hot basking spots. So for instance, for these Ackie monitors, they need basking spots well into the hundreds, even 120 degrees. But that doesn't mean they don't need humidity. So even though these guys are found in arid Australia out in the desert, they're not spending 100% of their time out in the over 100 degree sun. They come out, they bask, they warm up, they get the energy they need because they're exothermic. And then they go back in until they hunker back down into their dens and burrows until it's more optimal for them to actually do their hunting and moving around. And so when you think about that, okay, what are their den sites or their burrows like? They're a lot cooler and they're very humid. So even though this guy comes from arid Australia, he needs the basking spot over 120 degrees, he still needs somewhere where he can go to for humidity. And so that is represented in a lot of other species as well. That includes leopard geckos, bearded dragons, fat-tailed geckos, as well as regular tropical species that already we kind of have a bit of a hard time keeping humidity for ball pythons and stuff like that. But so for instance, this guy, he's kept in a 4x2 enclosure here. He has a very high basking spot on one end of the enclosure, but on the other end, he has a big half log that's filled with cypress mulch and sphagnum moss that I have to keep humid as well. And that's because they still need that humidity. If you don't have humidity with your reptiles, that will lead to bad sheds. And bad sheds is a whole subject that I don't want to get too much into, but basically what that is that they need more humidity, period. And so with lizards of all species, if there's not enough humidity, that can lead to bad sheds and stuck sheds, and it can actually end up eventually cutting off circulation to the toes, and they can lose parts of their toes, the tips, or even whole things. And we'll get a little bit closer on this guy, but Remus here, before we got him, because we got him as an adult, because he didn't have proper humidity, even though his temps were correct, as far as basking spot goes, because he didn't have access to a humid hide or a water bowl, because they will get into water, they will drink out of there as well. I've seen him do it countless times. He ended up having constriction on his toes, and he's lost quite a few of the end digits in his claws on most of his toes. And that can also happen to leopard geckos. They can happen to fat tails and bearded dragons, like we said. Specifically for leopard geckos, yes, they are found out, and fat-tailed geckos too, they are found out in the arid deserts, but like I said, they come out and they get their basking and they bask for a little while and then they start moving around. They're not always cruising around in the hot temps. So access to a big humid hide is really good for them, because when they're not basking and they're not hunting, they're in their dens, they're in their burrows, and that's where there's a lot more humidity. That's where the temps are a little bit cooler. And that's where they can, kind of help with their shedding and everything else like that. And I am a little upset at you, Remus, because when we did the video about miniature dwarf monitor lizards and you were in there, you were cruising all over the place. It's probably because he ate like 5 dubia roaches yesterday. He's a big fatty today. But that's basically really all I kind of wanted to sum up today, is that, it seems almost kind of like when we talk about hide boxes with sphagnum moss and stuff, it almost for some of the more experienced reptile keepers, it almost seems like, oh, well, then that means you're just not dialing in your habitat correctly. But I think that might be something that's beneficial for a lot of reptile species, lizards, snakes, or whatever, that, we have to think about what they want for the area that they're in, but also micro habitats as well. So you want to have a big basking spot, you want to have a nice area for them to bask, and you also want to make sure you have enough room for them to properly thermoregulate. That's what we're always, thinking about and doing stuff like that. But a proper humidity where they can get in, where it's cooler, where it's humid, where they can get away and they can work on sloughing off their shed skin. That's also part of proper thermoregulation and giving them enough, places and area for them to move around as close to what we can, close as we can get to actually giving them what they would be found in their natural habitats. Like we said, like I've said it before, we basically do just keep these guys in boxes in our houses. So it's up to us to try to give them as much of what we can to help them try to give them some simulation of what they would be like in the wild. And so giving them enough area to properly thermoregulate, a high basking spot for these desert species, but also a proper humid hide, so that way they can avoid things like this. Blue-tongued skinks, you see a lot of adult blue-tongued skinks that are missing toes. It's because a lot of them actually come from Indonesia, because any Australian animals that we have here in the United States, they come from either European lines or stuff that we already have in the States. But in Indonesia, they need a lot more humidity than you would see in an Australian species, and so everyone keeps them like they're Australians, so they lose a lot of toes. They're not giving them enough proper humidity. And that's the same thing that can happen with bearded dragons and these Ackie monitor lizards and several other species. So that's just something that you guys want to think about. If you are thinking about getting an arid species like leopard geckos, bearded dragons, they are great first-time reptile pets. Even if you're an experienced keeper, there's a lot that you can enjoy from them. But that's something that that you guys should probably think about a little bit about too, is that, yeah, they need those high temps, but they need somewhere to get a little bit of that humidity, a little bit cooler, and for them to be able to shed properly. I hope you did enjoy this video, or at least got something out of it, probably some decent information, I hope. Once again, I'm not going to say I'm the perfect reptile experienced keeper, but I've been doing it for a while, and I do keep a number of species, and they all seem to be doing pretty well. So just wanted to share that a little bit. If you can, please like and subscribe. If you hit that bell notification, I know it's a little weird, but if you do hit that bell subscribe button in that bar, it does kind of help YouTube say, oh, this guy, people are actually following him and they're looking at him, so they're going to promote a little bit better. And that way we can get across to a wider audience for more people to see these things, and to, be a little bit more interested and knowledgeable about reptiles. If you have any questions, comments, ideas for future videos, ideas to help improve this, let me know down in the comments. Hit me up on Instagram or Facebook, jzsreptiles, and I'll catch you next time.